Truly delighted to be in this wonderful campus here. Ashoka is a great pride of the country. It's a wonderful institution that has been built up, and every time I come here, I go back greatly inspired by the great work being done in this wonderful institution. It's always good to be in the midst of young students, because it inspires people like me when I interact with all of you. And I'm delighted that the subject of today's debate is Viksit Bharat, and many of you will examine this issue very closely. Let me just broadly put issues in a little bit of perspective. When India got colonized in 1700, India's share in global GDP was about 24%. By the time we became independent in 1947, our share had dwindled down to a mere 5%. And then in the post-independent era, the British Raj was really replaced by the license Raj, and we really throttled the dynamism and energy of the private sector by putting in a lot of licensing, controls, procedures, paperwork, rules, acts, procedures. All that continued till about 1991. And in the interim period, we had a growth of about roughly 3 to 3.5%. And one of our very distinguished economists then, who was heading the Delhi School of Economics, had termed our growth rate as the Hindu rate of growth, and said that actually we cannot grow beyond this, which to my mind was an absolute fallacy, because in 1991, when we had reforms, it unleashed great amount of productive efficiency. We delicensed the industrial manufacturing process. We liberalized a lot in many areas, and efficiency grew, investment grew, private sector grew in that period. But after the 91, when Indian economy grew, we needed many more structural reforms, which were not carried out for a long period of time. And then between 2003 and 2008, as you see, when the global economy grew, India grew at a blistering pace. India grew between 2003 and 2008 at a blistering pace. But we should have used that period also to put in huge amount of good quality infrastructure. We could have used that period to do a lot of ease of doing business. We could have used that period to liberalize further in a vast range of areas. That opportunity was lost between 2003 and 2008. And then 2008, there was a global financial crisis. There was a major global financial crisis. And that led to the formation of G20 globally. And then, because of this global financial crisis, Government of India gave several financial packages, and this led to an inflationary trend in our economy. And instead of, again, carrying supply-side economics reforms, that is, again, focusing on structural reforms, we kept on giving financial packages. So 3 financial packages was given, and this led in 2011-12 to a huge ballooning of crisis. In 2011 end, we had a very severe dent in our economy, and this was, the economy came to a situation where there was inflation, there was slow growth, there were a range of crises. Foreign trade had slowed down, exports had slowed down, and so on. And therefore, by the time we ended around 2013, 2014, we had a scenario of slow growth, of high inflation, many scams and also our inability to export our goods. And post 2014, when the new government came in, a series of reforms were initiated. The challenge before the government was to bring back macroeconomic fundamentals, ensure stability of growth, and bring in major reforms. And I think some of the major key structural reforms that were carried out was actually bringing in the goods and services tax, which is like bringing in one tax. It replaced 28 taxes and close to about 16 cesses into one single tax, which was paperless and cashless. And that means a tax like this across the entire European Union, one single tax was brought in. We also brought in a modern insolvency and bankruptcy code so that companies which are not able to repay are then able to go through a process of very fast bankruptcy proceedings, which has now got institutionalized. And then we brought in Real Estate Regulation Act, because a number of middle-class people had suffered. Builders were not able to complete their houses. They had taken money from middle class. Middle class had suffered across the country, and the Real Estate Regulation Act led to the cleaning up of the real estate sector. And I think the most important of all was that we brought down the corporate tax rate in India to global levels. Our tax rate, our corporate tax levels, we gave away 1,45,000 crores the government gave away, so that the private sector tax rates are kept at globally the best level. And much of the good balance sheet of the private sector, you see, is because of very low corporate taxes right now. So a series of reforms, structural reforms were brought in. But to my mind, the biggest reform that has been carried out has been the digitization of the Indian economy. So each one of us today in India, 1.4 billion people, have digital identity, which is the Aadhaar. Then between 2015 and 2017, India opened up 550 million bank accounts. That means 55% of the bank accounts were opened in India. Every second bank account was opened in India. And we embedded these bank accounts with both the digital identity of every Indian and the mobile number. And this led to what we now call the fast payments. So India today, each one of us, many of you would be using just your mobile to do the fast payments. For payment, for buying anything, pizza or anything that you buy, you use your mobile. That has been possible because of the 550 million bank accounts that we opened. During that period, Indian women, only 18% of the women had bank accounts. Today, close to about 88% of the women have bank accounts. But what has, as a consequence, happened is that India today does 46% of the real-time fast payments in the world. We do about 126 billion fast payments last year we did. The second was China with just 28 billion fast payments. That was the difference. So we do about 46%. That's the difference. But as a consequence of this, many people like me, last 4.5 years, for instance, I have not been to a physical bank. I have not been to an ATM machine. I have not used my checkbook. I have just used my mobile. My mobile is my bank. And what has happened as a consequence of this, when I was a young officer, I just joined the service, I was working in the fisheries sector of Kerala, and my job was to transform the lives of traditional fishermen. I could give them new outboard motors so that they can go much further into the sea. I could give them new fishing nets. I could give them new fishing crafts, fiberglass crafts. But opening their bank account used to take us, know your customer, used to take 7 to 8 months. Today, we open a bank account based on biometric in less than a minute. So we've seen the transformational journey from about 8 months to less than a minute in opening of bank account. So from fast payments, what have we seen? We've seen the emergence of number of young startups. If you look at MobiKwik, if you look at Lending Cart, if you look at Pine Lab, what did they do? They cut away paperwork, physical work. They started looking at payment history and started doing credit. So a number of our young startups, which are all unicorn today, do credit on the basis of digital payment history. They just look at your digital history and give you credit. And then there were a number of young startups like Zerodha, Grow, Upstock, and these are all startups which we've seen in the last 4-5 years. Young startups, they took stock market, wealth creation to tier 2, tier 3 cities and rural areas, and therefore today they've made people in tier 2, tier 3 cities, rural areas access stock markets. And therefore, today they control about 35% of the stock market. These are all young startups, young people like all of you sitting here. And then we had another set of young startups like GoDigit and Acco, who provide insurance in less than a minute on your mobile. And therefore, the insurance market, which required a lot of paperwork, it used to take me 5 months, 6 months to get an insurance policy from LIC. You can get a car insurance, you can get any insurance on the go, on the mobile today. So what has India done is it enables fast payment in 30 seconds. It has enabled insurance policy in less than a minute. But one of the main things that happened as a consequence of all this was that the cost of acquisition of a customer had fallen very rapidly. And a company like Jio, Reliance Jio, which came in, could get 450 million customers in less than a year's time. 450 million customers in a year's time has not happened anywhere in the world. And that could happen because on the use of biometric, because you could establish digital identity of a person, they could get all their customers. And the cost of acquisition of a customer had fallen from $150 to less than $1 in India. That has been the big transformation. And that is why independent study by Bank of International Settlement, the Bank of International Settlement said what India has achieved in digitization in 9 years' time would have taken India 50 years to achieve. What India has achieved in 9 years would have taken India 50 years to achieve. And this is important because if you look at all the technological innovations that have happened in the world, in the last two decades, all innovations have come from big tech. They've come from Google, they've come from Amazon, they've come from Meta, they've come from Apple, and in the Chinese part of the world, they've come from Tencent and Alibaba. So big tech has used your data, my data, all to do more and more innovation based on data. What India did was something very different. India created the digital identity. It created the public interest layer. It's a public interest layer on top of which we've allowed private sector to compete. And PhonePe competes with Google Pay in India. And therefore, what we did was that on top of the public interest layer, private sector was competing and innovating. And our model was open source, it was open API, it was globally, totally interoperable. And because it was globally interoperable, you could take your UPI has gone to now about 15 countries, different countries of the world. You can do UPI from France, you can do UPI from Singapore. And we made a model which is enabled us to do innovation at population scale. We've been able to reach out to 1.4 billion people of India at very low cost. So population scale innovation at low cost has been the transformation. And the challenge is that what India has done in many of these areas like insurance, in fast payments, in wealth creation, if India has done the same thing in education through Diksha and Swayam, we've taken Diksha and Swayam to many other parts of the country. We've done this with DigiLocker. If India is able to find a solution for the 1.4 billion people of India, India will actually finding a solution for the 4 billion people of the world who will be moving from poverty to middle class in the next 2 to 2.5 decades. So the market is not just the 1.4 billion people of India, is the next 4.5 billion people who will be moving from poverty to middle class in the next 2.5 decades. That's the size of the market. So that's what we've done on structural reforms on digitization. The other big thing that's happened in India in the last few years has been how we've made growth with inclusiveness, growth with equity possible. And it's important to get a picture of the size and scale of what India has done. India has made 40 million houses. 40 million houses for its citizens. I mean, 40 million houses is like making a house for every single citizen of Australia. I mean, that means India has actually created in houses a complete Australia for its citizens. We've provided about 110 million toilets. 110 million toilets is like making a toilet for every single citizen of Germany. That's the size of the population of Germany. And we've provided piped water connection to 253 million Indians. 253 million Indians means that we've provided a piped water connection to every single citizen of Brazil. That's the size and scale of what we've done. We've also provided electricity connection to 30 million houses. That's Canada and Argentina together. You know, that's the size and scale of what India has done. But more important than that, we focused on infrastructure. We've built about 77,000 kilometers of roads. So 77,000 kilometers of road has a huge multiplier impact on our economy. And that's almost 2.5 times the entire diameter of the earth. That's what India has done in terms of infrastructure. So we've radically transformed the lives of citizens by providing housing, by providing toilets, by providing electricity connection, by providing piped water connection, and ensured that we are able to do growth with equity in this country. And that is very important, that whatever you look at Viksit Bharat, it must be inclusive growth. And whatever we do, we must be able to transform the lives of our citizens. And that is what we've enabled in the last few years to be able to do. Now, as we go ahead, the challenge is, what do we achieve by the time we become 100? And that's what you'll do, Viksit Bharat by 2047. And the challenge for India is that we are growing at 7.3%. The challenge is that we must be able to raise the per capita income of every Indian, and that means we must be able to grow at even higher rates. And higher rates means that if you look at the history of the world in the past, when Japan was growing post-World War II, it could grow at 9%. You look at the history of Korea. Korea has grown for 2 decades at 9% plus. In recent times, China has grown at about 10% plus. So the challenge for India is to accelerate the pace of growth and grow at 10%, 9 to 10% for a 3-decade period to make itself, by the time we'll become the third, we are the fastest growing large economy in the world. Fastest growing large economy in the world. We are the 5th largest economy. By 2027, we'll be the 3rd largest economy. But the challenge for us is to be a $35 trillion economy by 2047. By 2047, we must be a $35 trillion economy so that we raise the per capita income of our citizens. And there is a difference between growing at 6%, there's a difference at growing at 8%, there's a difference in growing at 10%. The compounding power of growth is very powerful. And if you grow at higher rates, your per capita income of every citizen rises. So if you do a modeling and see what happens at 6%, what happens at 8%, what happens at 9%, what happens at 10%, many of you will realize that the significance of higher growth changes the quality of life of every citizen. And to be able to do that, to be able to grow that at 10%, India needs constant innovation. India needs constant disruption. And it's people like you, all of you young people, who will innovate, who will bring disruption, and that is what India is doing in many areas. So what has India done? India has opened up new areas of growth. India's totally liberalized its space economy. India has totally liberalized its geospatial economy. India has totally liberalized its drone economy. All these are sectors where all of you young people have an opportunity to make India grow. And all these are going to be the emerging areas of growth. And that's why we keep emphasizing, the Prime Minister keeps emphasizing that growth will come if India works in all the sunrise areas of growth. And the sunrise areas of growth are areas, many of which will be related to climate action. Because while we've not contributed to occupying the carbon space in the world, our carbon utilization is still very low at 1.96 metric ton, which is about close to just about 3% of the total carbon space. Whereas as a country, we are given a population which should be entitled to about 17.5% of the carbon space. But irrespective of that, the Prime Minister has taken the challenge that India will be the first country in the world to industrialize, to become a manufacturing nation through a process of decarbonization. And therefore, we've done 185 gigawatt of renewables. We are using solar energy to crack water, to produce green hydrogen. Today, we import about 180 billion worth of fossil fuel. What the Prime Minister said is that by the time we become 12047, we should be an exporter of energy instead of being an importer of energy. This means that we should be a champion of green hydrogen. We should use green hydrogen in steel, in cement, in refinery. But to become a champion in green hydrogen, we should be able to manufacture. India's climatically blessed, and therefore we should produce lots of renewables to crack water, use electrolyzer. And therefore, we should, by 2047, become a global champion of climate action. We should be an exporter of energy. We should be the cheapest exporter of energy. We should be the cheapest producer of energy, of clean energy. We should be the biggest manufacturer of electrolyzer. These are completely new areas of growth. For us to be a Viksit Bharat, you'll have to disrupt, you'll have to innovate, you'll have to do a huge amount of fresh thinking, and most critically, be top class in execution. What has been demonstrated is that India is capable of top class execution in housing, in toilets, in piped water supply, in solar energy, all these areas, and now in mobile manufacturing. In all these areas, India has demonstrated its great ability to transform the lives of Indian citizens. So, ladies and gentlemen, Viksit Bharat, while I've told you what has happened, there are many, many challenges also for the next few years as we move forward to be a Viksit Bharat. And the challenge will be that, we've largely grown on the back of services sector. We need to grow on the back of manufacturing. How do we make India a manufacturing nation? How do we urbanize? Because urbanization will be a very critical driver of growth. How do we do sustainable urbanization? When you drive down from Delhi to Rajasthan, you will see a lot of unsustainable urbanization. How do we do transportation? How do we do urbanization on the back of public transportation? And therefore, how do we get into when Europe was urbanizing, America was urbanizing, they did urbanization on the back of cars. They have 1,100 cars per 1,000 people. Europe has 900 cars per 1,000 people. We have only 21 cars per 1,000 people. So we can technologically leapfrog into a completely new process. Our level of destruction will be very low. And therefore, urbanization, what kind of urbanization do we want? And thirdly, to my mind, how do we improve, which is very important, how do we improve learning outcomes, health outcomes, how do we improve nutritional standards? All these are critical challenges. The new educational policy talks about many of these things which has been spelled out. The health mission talks about many of these things. We are today providing insurance to 500 million Indians, 500 million Indians, which is totally cashless, paperless. We've opened up close to about almost 1,000 new primary health and wellness centers, which integrates yoga with health. And therefore, these will be the many new challenges which we'd like you to debate and discuss on how to accelerate the process of rapid growth of 9 to 10% with financial acquisition, with financial inclusion and equity as India marches forward. So I look forward to this very interesting debate. I look forward to a lot of energy, vibrancy, and dynamism from all the young debaters on how do they foresee India as a driver of growth, not merely in India, but how do we transform the model of what India is doing and take it to other parts of the world. But one critical thing which is very important is when India grows, it must be an exporting nation. It'll be very difficult for India to grow without becoming globally competitive and making India export to other parts of the world, as we are doing in many other things. And therefore, I look forward to hearing some of these very interesting facets of your perspective on taking India forward during the Viksit Bharat period and making India a champion of many areas, not merely services, but manufacturing, urbanization, enhancing our agriculture productivity, and more critically, making India a champion in education, health, and nutrition, which is all very critical. Thank you very much. With these few words, I'll conclude. I look forward to a very interesting debate and discussion. Thank you.
Hello, sir. Good afternoon. I am Harsh. I am a second-year student at Ashoka. I am pursuing a degree in political science and IR. So my question to you is that, as you rightly mentioned in your address, that India should currently focus upon a lot upon manufacturing per se. So how can India sort of further utilize the success of the production-linked incentive scheme and with regard to the China Plus One strategy to enhance its Make in India campaign, as again the global attention is shifting a lot towards alternative manufacturing destinations. So what steps we can undertake to maximize the potential impact of Make in India particularly?
So firstly, I think a lot of work has been done on ease of doing business by this government. We were ranked 142nd earlier. We've scrapped about 1,500 laws. We've scrapped a lot of rules, regulation, procedures, and acts. A lot of this now has to shift to the states. And in the next 5 to 6 years, actually states need to become very competitive. Secondly, we need to create a sense of competition among states. We need to name and shame them. We need to rank them like we started doing on ease of doing business. Huge amount of competition will spur change. Actually, we need to produce all these states as champions. So if you look at the manufacturing, Gujarat has done well, Maharashtra has done well, Tamil Nadu has done well. We need the mineral-rich states of Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Orissa now to become the champions of manufacturing. And if they become because they're really mineral rich, if they become the champions of manufacturing, they'll grow at about 10% plus for next 3 decades, and India will grow. It's very important now that the movement for growth comes now from the states, and particularly the states in the eastern part of India. That's number one. Number two, to my mind, it's very important to understand that the manufacturing will get more and more digital. It'll be totally digital. The startup movement has shown that we need to actually change the curriculum of our educational system in many of our triple IITs, IITs. Today our startup movement, we started the startup movement in 2016. There were just 350 startups. Today we have 110,000 startups. We have over 115 unicorns in India. But there is a very big shortage of developers, product developers. There's a shortage of 1 million product developers for startups. Now the world will be defined by machine learning, artificial intelligence. There's completely new category of prompt engineers now. So we need to have data scientists, we need artificial engineers, we need machine learners, we need a completely new set of skills for tomorrow's world. And that is where the curriculum content must change in many of these areas. Manufacturing will be totally digitized. It will be very personalized. Every single individual will get the product that he demands, and therefore digitization will be the key to India's growth story in the years to come.
Hello, sir. I'm Tejas. I'm a first-year student at Ashoka. Currently pursuing computer science. I wanted to ask a question on the lack of an overarching policy vision document in India. A lot of the countries, especially a lot of the G7 and G20 countries, produce a national defense, a national foreign policy, and I'm not sure, but I think even a national economic policy strategy. What we have is a state where on every single law that we seek to pass or every single policy decision that we seek to bring. We have a lot of different policy committees, we have a lot of different reports, but we don't have an overarching vision for that. So it's kind of like all over the place. What are your thoughts on that?
No, NITI Aayog had come out with a plan for 7 years, for 3 years and for 7 years. That's available on the net. But now, new plan for Viksit Bharat, what India should do for 2047, the Prime Minister has already announced will be unveiled very shortly. The Prime Minister has highlighted that actually in one of his interactions, and I think work on that is already going on across sectors. So you'll have a clear vision and an action plan for 2047.
My question is, despite the achievements of NITI Aayog and the Indian government in recent years, people at the lower rungs of the society are yet to reap the benefits of the policies that are being devised. So where does India actually lack in implementing the policies that are suggested by NITI Aayog and other government think tanks?
No, I don't think that question is based on the correct assumptions. As I said, in the last 9 years, we've been able to provide housing, electricity connection, piped water supply. We've been able to ensure that toilets are provided. The quality of life of an average citizen, if you go to a rural area, is radically different. I'm saying this because I ran this aspirational district program, which covered the most backward districts of India, 115 of the most backward districts of India. West Bengal did not participate, so 3 districts were taken out, 112 districts were there. Now in 112 districts, many of them you would not say Namsai in Arunachal, etc. You would not have even heard the name of several of these districts, and I would request you to go through the names of these districts. They are all available on the net. They are the most backward districts of India. The target given to us by the Prime Minister was that you transform them in a period of 3 years. Now what we did was we picked up outcomes. We didn't look at inputs, but outcomes, only outcomes, like education improvement, learning outcome improvement, health outcome improvements, nutritional standards, etc. And we created a dashboard on a real-time basis. When I was a young officer, data was not available. Data used to come 3 years, 4 years, 5 years later. Today, why India is transformed is because data is possible on a real-time basis today on mobile. You get access to real-time data. So we were getting data on a real-time basis on how transformation is taking place, and we were putting out the performance of districts on a minute-to-minute, minute-to-minute, minute-to-minute basis, And therefore, we could show that we were putting out the ranking on a monthly basis, and we were naming and shaming the districts. Which collector has done well, which MP has done well, which MLA has done well in his district, which district has not done well. And because when you put out the ranking on a month basis, this month if I've not done well, I'll be challenged to do well in the next month. And therefore, we've got a lot of young collectors posted to these districts. We filled up all the posts of medical officers, health officers. We truly worked hard for 3 years on outcomes. By just naming and shaming and putting the rankings in public domain, because my belief is that competition is very critical. Bringing out competition and putting out ranking in public domain is very critical. We did this, and in 3 years, we transformed 115 districts, and at least 80% of the districts today are doing better than the best performing districts of India. So that is about transformation at the grassroots level.
My question stems from the fact that I did an internship with NITI Aayog under the Infrastructure Connectivity Department, and I remember you were part of the event in the G20 that we organized. And my question was that what is the role of EV technology in terms of India's development, as India already has an edge over the world in terms of EV, especially in few segments like 2-wheelers and 3-wheelers. I just wanted to gain your insights.
No, electric vehicles are very important, and it's very important because the automobile sector contributes close to about 10% of India's manufacturing. It contributes very significantly to India's GDP, but it contributes in the manufacturing, almost contributes about 35% of the jobs. So technology is changing. The world is moving from combustion to electric vehicles. If we do not go electric, we will lose this market share. We'll totally lose this market share. Nobody will buy electric after 5 years, let me tell you this. And that's why it's very important that for every two-wheeler, we are the biggest manufacturer of three-wheelers, we are the second biggest manufacturer of two-wheeler, and India must aim to go fully electric on two-wheelers and three-wheelers by 2030. What will happen as a consequence of that is that we will provide electric vehicles for our domestic company, for our domestic population, but we'll become a champion of exports of electric vehicles. We will then be exporting electric vehicles all over the world. We should also ensure that all our buses, we've done this tender of 5,500 buses when I was in NITI Aayog. We demonstrated that the price, operational cost of electric vehicles is much cheaper than diesel vehicles, much cheaper. And we should aim to ensure that all our buses go totally electric. This is a huge opportunity for India to actually disrupt in electric chargers, in buses, two-wheelers, three-wheelers, all these areas. By 2030, India must be a fully electric nation.
सही समय है